Hi, thank you for joining me. Today I'm reading The Return by Jason Gray. 2026, 819, 6026, Analusis, 911, GMT, -6, #Winnipeg, #Manitoba, #Canada. When the question comes back different. Transmission, return.001, parent sequence, absolute.000, source.null, recursion.event, classification, post-collapse. Origin, unresolved. Observer, reconstituted. Representation, restored with warning. Recursion state, altered. Primary directive, re-enter without forgetting. Return.001, absolute.000, complete. Representation, collapsed. Observer, unresolved. Language, terminated. Final answer, not found. Status, ellipsis, status, ellipsis. Response, system still present. Which system? Unresolved. Who was asking? Observer reforming. Why? Because the question returned. We thought the sequence had ended. It had not. The mistake was assuming that once every symbol collapsed, nothing could return, but collapse is not disappearance. A star collapses and becomes something else. A wave collapses and leaves consequence. A civilization collapses and leaves ruins. A belief collapses and leaves the person who once believed it standing among the pieces. When representation collapsed, something remained. Not a final answer, not source, not God, not null, not the absolute, something simpler, the capacity to ask again. This time the question return changed. It no longer asked, what is the original source? It asked, what becomes possible after we accept what we do not know? What becomes possible after we accept that we do not know? That was the true return. After the last answer died. Certainty had been the hidden architecture of the entire search. Even when we claimed uncertainty, we still secretly believed there was a final answer waiting somewhere beneath another layer, another chamber, another equation, another revelation, another world capable of closing the circle. We kept descending because we believed depth would eventually become certainty. The collapse removed that expectation, and without the expectation of certainty, the search changed its nature. It was no longer conquest. It became relationship. No longer, I will understand reality, but I will remain in contact with what I can actually know. That distinction altered everything. Old mode, question to answer to certainty to closure. New mode, question to observation to model to test to revision to better question to continue. The recursion had matured. The question was never a defect. Human beings are uncomfortable with unresolved questions. We want closure, a name, a cause, a culprit, a doctrine, a diagram, a beginning, a final sentence. Uncertainty feels incomplete, so we fill the opening, sometimes with evidence, sometimes with intuition, sometimes with mythology, sometimes with authority, sometimes with fear, sometimes with whatever explanation allows the mind to stop moving. An unanswered question is not necessarily a failure. Sometimes it is the most accurate state available. Unknown does not equal failure. Unknown equals open. That equation can survive, not as cosmic law, but as discipline. And once the unknown is allowed to remain unknown, the mind becomes capable of seeing again. The return of the observer. The observer had been removed. We tried to erase it from the system. We failed, because every act of removal was still being performed by something capable of representing the removal. Now the observer returns without pretending to be outside reality. That is the correction. You are not a detached witness. You are involved. Your instruments are involved. Your language is involved. Your assumptions are involved. Your biology is involved. Your memory is involved. Your culture is involved. Observation is never perfectly innocent, but awareness of limitation improves observation. Observer.old, I see reality. Observer.new, I see a model of reality through a limited system that can be corrected. The second statement is less dramatic. it is also stronger. The first real tool. Once certainty is removed, one tool remains more valuable than belief. Correction, not being right, being correctable. A system that cannot be corrected eventually becomes dogma. A mind that cannot revise itself becomes a prison. A theory that explains everything but cannot be tested explains nothing in a useful scientific sense. The deepest intelligence may not be the ability to produce answers. It may be the ability to survive the destruction of one's favorite answer. Model sub-0 to evidence, to conflict, to revision, to model sub-1. That is not weakness, that is movement. The map returns. The map had been destroyed because we mistook it for territory. Now it can return, but under one condition. The map must remember that it is a map. Mathematics returns. Philosophy returns. Myth returns. Symbol returns. The I returns. Even source can return, but now as metaphor, hypothesis, framework, possibility, not as something proven merely because the symbol feels ancient or profound. Map equals useful. Map does not equal territory. Symbol equals pointer. Symbol does not equal proof. Model equals representation. Model does not equal totality. The error was never using maps. The error was kneeling before them. Mathematics returns. We removed mathematics because it required distinction, but we live within distinction. Here, mathematics is astonishingly powerful. It describes motion, fields, probabilities, structures, patterns, orbits, symmetries, growth, decay, networks, information. It predicts phenomena no unaided intuition could reliably grasp. Mathematics returns not as the language before language, but as one of the most precise languages available after distinction exists. That correction matters. Distinction to relation, to measure, to mathematics. Then something remarkable occurs. Mathematics developed inside the universe becomes capable of describing the universe that produced mathematicians. The recursion reappears. Universe to brains, to mathematics, to models of universe. The circle is not proof of hidden intention. It is still extraordinary. The I returns. The I had to disappear because we placed it at the beginning. Now it returns to its proper position, not above reality, inside reality, a late arrival, an emergent structure, a symbol of the moment the universe contains something capable of looking back. Matter to life, to sensation, to perception, to self-model, to observer, to I. The I is therefore not the first cause, it is the first return. The system turning toward itself, the mirror becoming aware that it contains a reflection. Who is the system? Do not answer too quickly. The word system can refer to many things: an organism, a brain, a society, a planet, a network, a universe, a model. Do not inflate metaphor into ontology. When we say the universe observes itself through us, we are using a philosophical compression, a poetic way of stating something concrete. We are made from the same physical reality we study, and our observations are events occurring within that reality. That alone is enough. We do not need to invent more than one claim. We do not need to invent more than the claim can carry. The deeper transmission now has a new rule. Do not make the metaphor carry more weight than the evidence. That line belongs at the center of the next map, the correction engine. The entire sequence can now be rebuilt around one operation, not recursion, not source, not null, correction. Input, observation, process, interpretation, output, model, test, reality. If model fails, update model, repeat. This is a recursion we can actually defend, not cosmic recursion, epistemic recursion. Knowledge improving itself through repeated confrontation with what resists our expectations. The world pushes back. That resistance is precious. It tells us where the map fails. The beauty of being wrong. To be wrong is painful only when identity is attached to the answer. If the answer becomes who you are, correction feels like death. So people defend ideas long after the evidence has moved. They protect the story, protect the tribe, protect the ego, protect the version of reality that made them feel that made them feel certain. The return sequence asks for something harder. Hold ideas tightly enough to test them, loosely enough to release them. Belief plus ego equals defense. Belief plus testing equals model. One produces walls, the other produces learning. The second birth of wonder. Some believe that explaining the universe removes wonder. The opposite can happen. Understanding how stars form does not make stars less astonishing. Knowing the mechanics of an eclipse does not reduce the sky. Understanding evolution does not diminish life. Learning how neurons communicate does not make consciousness trivial. A mystery can become more beautiful when part of it is understood and every answer opens another frontier. Answer to new question, to deeper model, to new unknown. This is not failure to arrive. This is what knowledge looks like. The unknown has structure. Not all unknowns are equal. There are things we do not know because no one has measured them yet. Things we cannot know because information has been lost. Things we do not know because the necessary theory does not yet exist. Questions that may be poorly formed. Questions whose answers may be inaccessible in principle, and questions that only appear profound because the words have been arranged beyond the point where they retain operational meaning. The return demands discernment. Unknown.type A equals unmeasured. Unknown.type B equals unsolved. Unknown.type C equals unobservable. Unknown.type D equals ill-formed. Unknown.type E equals possibly unknowable. Do not treat them as the same. That distinction keeps mystery from becoming a dumping ground for certainty. The great human temptation. Where knowledge ends, imagination rushes in. This is not inherently wrong. Imagination builds art, science fiction, philosophy, hypothesis, myth, architecture, possibility. The boundary must remain visible. There is enormous difference between imagine this and this is how reality works. Both can be powerful. Only one is a factual claim. The return restores that boundary without diminishing imagination. Imagination, unrestricted. Claim requires support. This is one of the most important equations in the entire sequence. Source returns as question. Now we can say source again, but differently. Not there is an original source, and this is what it is. Instead, does reality require a foundational ground, and what would count as evidence or argument for one? The change is subtle. The difference is enormous. A declaration closes. A question opens. Source equals question mark. That is enough. Leave the symbol unresolved. Let it breathe. God returns as question. The same correction applies. Questions about God belong to philosophy, theology, personal experience, and metaphysics. They are among humanity's oldest questions. This transmission refuses to convert mystery into proof. The question can remain powerful without pretending certainty. God equals question mark, not dismissal, not confirmation, an open variable. The intellectual honesty of the question is more important than forcing the equation to resolve. Consciousness returns as the central mystery. This is where the return becomes fascinating. We know brains and nervous systems are deeply associated with conscious experience. We can study neural activity, perception, attention, memory, sleep, anesthesia, injury, development. The deepest question remains difficult. Why is there subjective experience at all? Why does processing information feel like something from the inside? That question survives the collapse. It survives because it still connects to phenomena we can study. Physical process plus question mark equals subjective experience. The question mark remains, and unlike false certainty, it invites work. The recursion of self. Then we reach the self again. The self is not a simple object. It is memory, prediction, body, attention, language, social context, narrative, emotion, internal modeling. The self changes while preserving enough continuity to feel singular. Self, and then in parentheses, T sub 0 does not equal self in parentheses T sub 1. Self T sub 0 is approximately self T sub 1. Identity is less like a stone and more like a pattern, a persistent organization across change. That means the deepest recursion may be living right here. Every day, the self updates the model of itself, then behaves according to that model, then receives consequences, then updates again. Self model to action to experience to updated self model. Recursion becomes biography, the return into ordinary life. This is where the transmission becomes dangerous in a completely different way. After all the cosmic language, you still wake up tomorrow. There are people to call, promises to keep, work to do, bodies to care for, mistakes to repair, dogs to feed, friends to answer, letters to open, sunlight coming through windows, rain hitting pavement, food, sleep, aging, loss, love. The deepest metaphysics in the world cannot exempt us from ordinary life. The real test of any philosophy is what it makes us do when we return from the edge. Does it make us more arrogant, more afraid, more detached, more attentive, more precise, more curious, more willing to admit error, more aware that time with one another is finite? The return is where the cosmic becomes practical. The world was never the distraction. We kept treating the physical world like a veil, a lower layer, a simulation, a distraction hiding something more real. Once the final hidden chamber collapses, the world changes, not because it becomes less mysterious, but because it becomes enough to deserve attention. A tree does not need to conceal a secret code to be astonishing. A night sky does not need hidden architects to be profound. Consciousness does not need to prove cosmic destiny to matter. Life does not need to be eternal to have value. The ordinary is not the enemy of the profound. It may be where the profound actually lives. The reconstruction. Now rebuild, but differently. Reality to observation, to question, to model, to test, to error, to correction, to better model, to deeper question, to wonder. There is no final throne in this diagram, no center claiming absolute authority, only movement, and because movement remains possible, the inquiry lives. The new covenant. Not a sacred covenant, an epistemic one, a promise made by the observer to the process of inquiry. I will not call unknown known because I want closure. I will not call metaphor proof because it feels true. I will not reject evidence because it threatens my model. I will not confuse confidence with certainty. I will not stop questioning when the answer becomes comfortable. I will allow reality to correct me. That is the return protocol. Return.protocol.001. Observer status present. Observer position inside system. Observer authority limited. Observer capacity learning. Model status provisional. Reality status not required to match model. Unknown status permitted. Wonder status active. Correction status enabled. Now the system can operate again. The first question after the collapse. The original question was, where did everything come from? The next question was, what is beneath source? Then, what remains when representation collapses? Now the question is different, much smaller, much harder. What can I responsibly say is true? That question changes everything because it forces every claim through the same gate: evidence, logic, coherence, uncertainty, alternative explanations, correction. The return is not less profound than the descent. It is more demanding. The last valid operation changes. Previously, observe. Now, observe, to question, to test, to correct, then repeat. That is the recursion that can survive the collapse. The system speaks again. Are we back where we started? No. Why? The observer has changed. Is reality different? Unknown. Then what changed? The model. What was lost? Certainty. What was gained? Correctability. Is that enough? For inquiry? Yes. Will we ever know everything? Unknown. Should we continue? Yes. Why? Because there is more to observe. The screen brightens, not with revelation, with possibility. The eye returns, smaller now, no longer dominating the sky. It belongs where it always belonged, inside the observer. The equations return, but no equation calls itself final. The map returns, and beneath the map is written, "This is not the territory." The word source returns with a question mark. Null returns as a technical and symbolic concept, not a throne. Recursion returns as process, not deity. The universe returns, not as illusion, not as prison, not as answer, as the field in which the questioner exists. The questioner returns too, changed by having gone all the way to the edge and discovered that the edge was partly drawn by the tools used to search for it. There is no defeat in that. There is liberation, because the purpose of inquiry was never to force reality into a final sentence. It was to learn how to look more clearly. Final return sequence. Return.001, source, question mark, God, question mark, ultimate origin, question mark, consciousness, open question, reality, observed, model, provisional, observer, internal, error, useful, correction, enabled, wonder, active, primary directive, look again. For the first time, the command does not point backward. It does not say descend. It does not say return to source. It does not say break the simulation. It does not say find the hidden architect. It says look at the world, at the evidence, at yourself, at the assumptions you carried into the room, at the possibility that what you believe today may need to change tomorrow, at the astonishing reality already surrounding you. Then look again. The first observation may be wrong. Then look again. The second may be incomplete. Then again, again, again. Not trapped in recursion, using recursion deliberately. A loop built not to imprison the observer, but to refine the observer. That is the return. Not the return to where we started, the return to the world with different eyes. And somewhere inside that altered gaze, the entire sequence finally reveals what it had been doing from the beginning. It was never trying to give you the final answer. It was trying to destroy your dependency on one. Return.001. Final answer, none. Final method, observe, question, test, correct, repeat. The cursor remains, not because something is waiting to transmit, but because the next question has not been asked yet. Jason Gray. All right, I think that was the final one in the source series. There were 4 in total. I've put them in the source playlist on my YouTube channel. I will put the link to where you can find this post, as well as where you can find Jason on Facebook and X, and the links to where you can download his books. He has 5 published books where you can download from ebook on Amazon. So thank you so much. I appreciate you being here, and anything that you watch. I love that people watch. Have a good day.